formula to it. A very simple formula.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This video is a little different. I wanted to talk about some of the horror movies that came from one of the most iconic years in pop culture, 1984. This year is one of those years that you set your 80s nostalgia in because so many things came out that year that defined that generation. And in the world of horror, so many things came out that year that truly defined horror movies and what is to come, and only some of them. Before we get started, if you'd like to listen to my podcast, it's on any service you could possibly want, and if it's not on one you'd like, please let me know. Also, if you'd like, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram @/shithorror. I also don't like to plug this too often, but I do have a Patreon, which I post the podcast episodes early and ad-free. Once we get enough patrons, I'm looking to do some kind of live stream type things on there. So yeah, let's get into the video. Starting with possibly one of the most popular ones on this entire list, besides a few others that we'll get to as we go on. Well, don't fall asleep, because the first on our list here is Nightmare on Elm Street. This movie came out on November 9th, 1984. It was made with a budget of $1.1 million and made $57 million and spawned multiple sequels and a remake. This movie also spawned the amazing performances of Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the biggest 3 franchises in horror movies. If you don't know the whole plot of this movie, there is a sleep demon named Freddy Krueger that kills you in your dreams. But then a girl named Nancy Thompson ends up stopping Freddy. There is more to this plot line, but that is for a whole separate video, which we'll see later on down the line when we get there. This movie though is one that you truly do think of when you think of the 80s. And the fact that this movie is a staple of the 80s but didn't really come out until almost the middle of the 1980s really shows just how special that movie really is, and just how creative and scary Wes Craven made this movie. Firestarter is originally a Stephen King novel but was eventually released as a movie in 1984. It's about a girl who has pyrokinetic abilities. Released on May 11th, 1984, it was made with a $12 million budget and only made $17.1 million at the box office. However, one thing of note about this movie is that it stars Drew Barrymore as one of her earliest entries into the horror genre, and Drew Barrymore would later star on the opening to Scream as Casey Becker. This is one of those movies that helped her gain her stardom post-E.T. that would help her land that role. This film is also one of the movies that would help grow the Stephen King adaptations of movies like eventually the It miniseries, The Mist, and Misery, among multiple countless adaptations. The name of this next movie is really funny when you consider that it's really not the last chapter, but also considering the first movie came out in 1980, this was the 4th movie in just 4 years. I am talking, of course, about Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. It released on April 13th, 1984, and it took $2.6 million to make, with a box office of $33 million. This movie promised the ending of Jason Voorhees, the star of the Friday the 13th series. It of course wouldn't actually end, but when everyone went to the theater, that's what they thought they were going to see, until part 6 would come out a few years later and resurrect him from the grave. Having Nightmare on Elm Street and this come out the same year is crazy. If you were a big horror fan in the 80s, this year was an amazing year, the same way that I think the last few years have been and the next few years will be. This is close to horror, but it's horror adjacent. Gremlins came out in 1984. It came out on June 8th, 1984. It was made with $11 million and profited $212.9 million. This movie is a lot as well, but there's something so sweet about this movie. The plot of these movies are these little creatures can't be in direct sunlight or get water on them or eat food after midnight. There's a lot more about this, but I think this movie is one that I don't really want to spoil. But this movie is as much of a staple of the 80s as anything else you could possibly think about or I could put onto this list. Ghostbusters is different, because this movie is like a horror comedy. Ghostbusters released June 8th, 1984 with a budget of between $25 to $30 million and grossing $295.2 million at the box office. The movie is one that even people who don't like horror movies will have seen this because of the type of movie that this is. If you don't know, it's about a group of people who have to capture ghosts and a marshmallow man. The movie is absolutely worth watching. If you somehow have not watched it yet, please go do. It is great. If you don't like it, that is cool, but I think that you will love it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really do greatly appreciate it. I would recommend watching every movie on this list if you haven't seen them yet. And yeah, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram @/shithorror and listen to my podcast wherever you listen to them. I love doing my podcast. If you do want to follow me or do have a few dollars you can spare for my Patreon account, that would be great, because I am looking to do some more Patreon exclusive things, but I need patrons to do that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for, thinking about. Please let me know if you would be interested in doing that with me, or doing that so we can kind of do some fun, cool things on there. But anyways, thank you much for listening to me talk about my favorite movies in the world. It's greatly appreciated. I love it more than anything in the world. Like always, treat every day like it's Halloween.